October 14th, 1962. 72,500 feet above the steaming jungles of Cuba. Major Richard Heyser sits alone in the pressurized coffin of a U-2 Dragon Lady, the silence of the stratosphere screaming in his ears. Below him lies the end of the world. Hidden in the palm groves are Soviet nuclear warheads capable of vaporizing 80 million Americans in less than 15 minutes. The intelligence analysts in Washington are blind, paralyzed by fear, and convinced that getting close enough for proof is a suicide mission that will trigger World War III. But they don't know that this lone pilot is flying a trajectory so insane, it defies every rule in the book. To understand the sheer madness of this moment, we must look away from the cockpit and peer into the sterile, air-conditioned panic rooms of Washington, D.C. For weeks, intelligence reports have been trickling in, whispers of Soviet freighters riding low in the water, strange convoys moving through the Cuban night, but the committee members are paralyzed by indecision. The ghosts of the past are strangling the present. Only 2 years prior, a U-2 was shot down over Russia, humiliating the United States and landing a pilot in a Soviet prison. Now, the very mention of a spy flight sends shivers down the spines of the Pentagon's top brass. The fear is palpable. The bureaucrats, the State Department officials, and the safe play strategists are locked in a terrifying stalemate. They argue over cloud cover percentages and diplomatic repercussions, terrified that a single error will turn the Cold War hot. They demand absolute proof of nuclear missiles, yet in the same breath, they forbid the pilots from taking the risks necessary to get it. It is a classic bureaucratic paradox. The terrified politicians and indecisive strategists want a zero-risk solution to an existential threat. They are looking at maps, pointing at safe zones, and drafting cautious flight plans that skirt the danger, praying that the blurry, grain-sized anomalies on their desks are just construction equipment. But physics does not care about politics, and the truth cannot be found from the safety of the perimeter. While the committeemen debate the impossible risk, the missiles in the jungle are being fueled. While the high-ranking officials in the Oval Office are suffocating under the weight of geopolitical theory, the solution to their paralysis is sitting in a cramped trailer at Edwards Air Force Base, and later, McCoy Air Force Base in Florida. Enter Major Richard Heyser. Major Heyser is not a politician. He is not a diplomat with a PhD in international relations. He is a driver, a man who speaks the language of altitude and airspeed, a man who views the world through a plexiglass visor rather than a policy memo. To the armchair generals in the Pentagon, he is merely a resource, a serial number attached to a flight suit. But Heyser belongs to a fraternity of men who operate in a realm that the analysts can barely comprehend. They fly the Lockheed U-2, known affectionately and terrifiedly as the Dragon Lady. And she is a cruel mistress. To understand why the mission the bureaucrats are debating is considered suicidal, you must understand the machine itself. The U-2 is not a fighter jet. It is a powered glider made of tinfoil and prayer. It is so fragile that a heavy-handed mechanic could punch a hole in the fuselage with a wrench. But the true terror of the U-2 lies in a deadly aerodynamic phenomenon known as the Coffin Corner. At 70, using on its feet, the air is so thin that the margin between life and death is measured in mere knots. If Heyser flies just a few miles per hour too slow, the thin air loses its grip on the wings, and the plane stalls, tumbling out of the sky like a dead leaf. But if he flies just a few miles per hour too fast, the aircraft hits the supersonic shockwave, the fragile wings shear off, and the pilot is disintegrated in the violent breakup. Heyser has to fly this razor's edge for hours, wrestling a control stick that fights him every inch of the way, encased in a claustrophobic pressure suit that smells of rubber and recycled sweat. While the experts in Washington are debating risk assessment models on chalkboards, Heyser and his fellow pilots know that any flight over hostile territory is a dance with death. But the flight plan now on the table, Mission 3101, is something else entirely. The textbook approach favored by the cautious ivory tower strategists is to skirt the edges, to peek in from the side, to stay over international waters where it is safe. They are terrified of a repeat of the Francis Gary Powers incident. They want a guarantee of safety, but safety produces blindness. The heretical idea, emerging from the operational level, from the men with grease under their fingernails and jet fuel in their lungs, is that they must stop skirting the issue. They propose a flight path that is a direct, vertical violation of the Soviet kill zone. The plan calls for Heyser to fly south to north, cutting across the island of Cuba directly over the suspected San Cristobal site. It is a trajectory that maximizes the sun angle for the cameras but places the U-2 squarely inside the engagement envelope of the Soviet SA-2 guideline missiles. It is a trajectory that screams, "Here I am." When this flight path is proposed, the reaction from the establishment is predictable panic. The State Department is horrified. The titans of the intelligence community argue that the risk is too high, that the cloud cover is too thick, that the political fallout of another downed pilot would be catastrophic. They want to wait. They want more data. They want a committee review. But nature does not wait for committees. A tropical depression is clearing. The pilots and operational planners at the Strategic Air Command know that this is the only window they will get. It is now or never. The confrontation is silent but violent. It is the clash between the theory of war and the reality of flying. The bureaucrats see a map with red lines they are afraid to cross. Heyser sees a job that needs to be done. Finally, the desperate gamble is authorized. Not because the experts agree, but because they have run out of options. The order comes down. Go. Heyser begins the pre-breathing ritual, sitting in a heavy recliner for hours, inhaling pure oxygen to purge the nitrogen from his blood so it doesn't boil in his veins at altitude. It is a lonely, meditative preparation for a suicide run. As he walks to the aircraft, he looks like an astronaut from a science fiction movie, a solitary man encased in technology, about to challenge the might of two superpowers. There are no generals in the cockpit with him. No committee members. No analysts. He climbs the ladder. The canopy closes. The sound of the world is replaced by the hiss of oxygen and the whine of the Pratt & Whitney J57 engine. He is alone. As the U-2 screams down the runway and leaps into the air with its bicycle landing gear falling away, Heyser leaves the world of politics behind. He climbs past the weather, past the airliners, past the point where human blood can survive without pressure. He levels off at 72, 500 feet. The sky above him is the black of space. The curve of the Earth is visible below. He turns the nose toward Cuba. He is now a trespasser in the most heavily defended airspace on the planet, armed with nothing but a camera and a crazy flight plan that the experts said was impossible to survive. His heart rate is steady. His hands are light on the yoke. He enters the Coffin Corner. He is the lone pilot carrying the weight of the world on flimsy wings, flying straight into the dragon's mouth because the men in the suits were too afraid to look. For exactly 6 terrifying minutes, Major Heyser is the loneliest man in human history. As he crosses the Cuban coastline, the impossible becomes reality. He is a ghost in the radar. Below him, the Soviet SA-2 operators are scanning their screens, hunting for the intruder. But Heyser's suicidal trajectory is perfect. He is moving fast, high, and silent. Inside the belly of the Dragon Lady, the massive Hycon B camera comes to life. This is the vindication of the heretical idea. The camera doesn't care about politics. It cares about optics. Its 36-inch lens rotates, snapping panoramic strips of the jungle below with terrifying clarity. Click. Whir. Click. Whir. Every sound is a heartbeat. If he drifts off course, the photos are useless. If he speeds up, the film blurs. Heyser holds the vibrating aircraft in a zen-like trance, capturing 928 frames of undeniable truth while painting a target on his own back. He turns north, escaping the lethal envelope just as the radar nets begin to tighten. When he touches down at McCoy Air Force Base, the film, the Golden Football, is rushed to Washington faster than the pilot can unzip his pressure suit. The developers at the National Photographic Interpretation Center, NPIC, pull the wet film from the canisters. The experts who claimed the flight was too dangerous, or that the structures were just palm trees, are silenced instantly. The data is absolute. The magnification is so precise they can see the canvas covers on the missile trailers. They identify the distinct footprint of the SS-4 Sando ballistic missile sites. The crazy gamble yielded the only thing that mattered: hard, cold, undeniable proof. Because one lone pilot dared to fly where the entire U.S. government feared to tread, the fog of war was instantly blown away. Those 928 frames land on President Kennedy's desk, and the world changes instantly. The guesswork is over. The blockade begins. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest humanity has ever come to extinction, is fought and won on the back of Heyser's film. But while the politicians take the podiums and the generals claim the victory, the pilot simply goes back to work. Major Richard Heyser does not get a ticker tape parade. He returns to the ready room, a quiet professional in a pressure suit. For decades, his name is buried in classified files, known only to the men who flew the edge of space. He saved the world not with a weapon, but with a camera, proving that sometimes the bravest act of war is simply daring to look the enemy in the eye. Today, we sleep under a sky that didn't burn, because a driver ignored the fear of the experts and flew the impossible line. History is written by the victors, but it is made by the outliers. If you want to uncover more stories of the forgotten individuals who defied the establishment to change the course of history, make sure you are subscribed to the Investigator's Archive. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a briefing. Stay curious, stay critical, and never trust the official story.